Today's reading is from the 18th chapter of John, beginning at the 12th verse. So the soldiers, their officer, and the Jewish police arrested Jesus and bound him. First, they took him to Annas, who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, the high priest that year. Caiaphas was the one who advised the Jews that it was better to have one person die for the people. Simon Peter and another disciple followed Jesus. Since that disciple was known to the high priest, he went with Jesus into the courtyard of the high priest. But Peter was standing outside the gate. So the other disciple, who was known to the high priest, went out, spoke to the woman who guarded the gate, and brought Peter in. The woman said to Peter, "You are not also one of this man's disciples, are you?" He said, "I am not." Now the slaves and the police had made a charcoal fire because it was cold, and they were standing around it and warming themselves. Peter also was standing with them and warming himself. Then the high priest questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered, "I have spoken openly to the world. I have always taught in synagogues and in the temple, where all the Jews came together. I have said nothing in secret." When he had said this, one of the police standing nearby struck Jesus on the face, saying, "Is that how you answer the high priest?" Jesus answered, "If I have spoken wrongly, testify to the wrong. But if I have spoken rightly, why do you strike me?" Then Annas sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest. Now Simon Peter was standing and warming himself, and they asked him, "You are not also one of his disciples, are you?" He denied it and said, "I am not." One of the slaves of the high priest, a relative of the man whose ear Peter had cut off, asked, "Didn't I see you in the garden with him?" Again, Peter denied it, and at that moment the cock crowed. Here ends the reading.
Thank you. Oh, Peter. We get this text every year, don't we? But usually it comes during Holy Week, on Maundy, Thursday. But in this, the fourth year of the narrative lectionary, they take the Holy Week texts and they spread them out during Lent, so you get a little more time to think about them and talk about them. So, anybody put their snow shovel away already?
No way.
No, right? Yes. We did not have a lot of snow shoveling this year, and the problem with that is if we get a big blizzard and I go out to shovel snow, I know I'm going to be using muscles that I don't have, right? I say that because this morning you might be using some muscles that you don't have. I want you to try to stretch out a little bit your mind, just a little bit. I'm gonna lay something out for us that maybe goes against everything we've ever thought about Peter. All right? What I learned about Peter growing up was this: don't be like Peter. He denied Jesus. He denied Jesus 3 times, and then the cock crowed. And didn't he love Jesus? What was his problem? Don't be like Peter. Or Judas, for that matter. Don't be like Judas. I can hear my mom. Don't be like Judas, don't be like Peter. My Sunday school teachers. This is kind of how it goes, right? But what if we look at this a bit differently. Right? I mean, one of the biggest mysteries to the early church was, why would Jesus die? If Jesus is God's son and he could do anything, why would he come here and allow himself to be killed? And they started thinking about that and thinking about that. And what they came up with a couple hundred years later was this idea that Jesus was a substitute for our death. Must have been. That's the only reason they could think of. That Jesus came to die so we don't have to. That's what I grew up knowing. And if that's the case, then shame on Peter, shame on Judas for participating in that. But what if we see it differently? What if the reason Jesus came was something different? Jesus tells us why he came in one very succinct sentence a few verses after this. So after our scripture for today, Jesus goes and he is before Annas, and then he's bound and he goes to Caiaphas, and then he is bound and he goes over to Pilate, because Caiaphas can't sentence anyone to death. It was not a part of the Jewish religion. And so they send him over to Pilate. And when he gets there, Pilate says, okay, you woke me up in the middle of the night, I'm paraphrasing. What do you want? And they said, well, this man deserves to die. And he says, well, what did he do? And they go, they didn't say what Jesus did. What they said was, well, we wouldn't have brought him here if he hadn't done something really, really bad. We've all said that before, right? Instead of telling the truth, we sort of tell the truth. And so Pilate takes Jesus inside the residence, and he talks to him one-on-one, and he says, what's going on here? And Jesus said, if my kingdom were of this world, I would have had my disciples fight for me. But my kingdom is not of this world. And Pilate goes, so you're a king? I don't think Pilate was too quick on the uptake. And Jesus says, the reason I have come. Anybody know what it is? You want me to tell you? Should we just pause here and bring a little more anticipation? Jesus says, the reason I have come is to testify to the truth. Funny, Jesus didn't say, the reason I came is to die for all these miserable sinners who are just going to turn their backs on me and walk away, or to betray me. Didn't say that. He said, I've come to testify to the truth. In our creed, what do we say? Jesus was crucified for speaking truth to power. What does that even mean? You might be asking. I have an opinion about this. Jesus was coming to try to say that the one thing people have believed since the beginning of time is a lie. And that one thing is if you're bigger, you can hit. I learned this when my parents went on vacation when I was 5. They went out to Colorado, and they didn't want a 5-year-old me in the car all the way to Colorado. Can you relate? So they put me at a home, the Altos. And the mom's name was Millie. And she was a big Finlander. And she was a no-nonsense kind of gal. And I was riding a bike way too big for me. They didn't have any my-size bikes, but I love to ride bike. And as I'm driving down the hill, I lost control, and the bike went out of control. And I kind of slowly bailed off and tumbled and had bumps and bruises and cuts all over my body, and I was crying. I'm 5. And I come in there, and Millie says this, "I'll teach you to cry." And she takes out a wooden spoon and spanks me. Never had I had a spanking before that. I didn't even know what that was. My little virgin bottom had never, ever been spanked. What she knows is that when you're bigger, you can hit. Sounds a little bit like somebody over in Eastern Europe who has a bit of a problem right now. He's being an aggressor to Ukraine. And he figures that because he's bigger, he can hit. But he's not really big enough. But what he didn't expect was the reaction of love that has poured out from the whole world towards the refugees from the Ukraine. We had a Russian choir here a couple years ago. I say a couple, it was probably like 7 or 8 years ago. And some of them stayed at our homes. And I am Facebook friends with 3 of them. When I go on their Facebook pages, they all have the colors blue and yellow and a little symbol that to them means we stand with Ukraine. And I thought, well, this is amazing. And I went and I looked at all of their friends. I was a Facebook stalker. And most of their friends have this. And I'm thinking, this tyrant doesn't have a chance. He doesn't stand a chance against this. He's betting on the fact that what real power is might. It's money. It's aggression. But real power, according to Jesus, is love. Jesus came to show us that no matter how much power and violence you could throw at him, he'll still love in return. And the people around that see that will love. And those people, when they were crucified, like Peter eventually was crucified, and other of the apostles were put to death, as people saw the witness of those people standing up in the face of aggression, they multiplied because of love. Jesus came to speak truth to power. He didn't kill himself. He went to a place where he knew if you speak truth to power, you will die. That's just a fact of reality. And if Peter had stood up in the courtyard and said, "Oh yeah, I'm a disciple too," he would have died as well. I think God was, with every fiber of God's being, trying to tell Peter, please, just tell him you don't know the guy. I need you later. This is not about loyalty at this point. It's about longevity. It's about what you're going to do for the kingdom. Maybe it's time to give Peter a pass. Maybe it's time to stop looking at him or looking at us. Don't be like Peter. Maybe it's time to say, you know what? Be like Peter. That one's a little easier. We'll save be like Judas another day. That's for another whole thing. But I think a case could be made. Jesus knew that he was going to speak truth to power. He knew he was going to die. Do you want to stand in the way of why Jesus came? I don't think you do. Judas felt terrible about what he did, and he killed himself. God has a plan for us in our lives, and it is speaking truth to power. That doesn't mean you have to go to the center of power and hold up a sign like some of these little old ladies in Russia that are being arrested, right? That's their calling. But maybe our calling is just to love our neighbors, even the ones that are hard to love, to do something good today, something loving, something kind. for somebody else. That's the calling we have. That's what it means to be like Peter. Amen. So this is the song that we rewrote. Sing it with us.